U.S. Army recruiters out with a new incentive to attract enlistees, $50,000. The service announcing the new incentive as it struggles to meet enlistment goals. Army brass says the pandemic has made it difficult to hold in-person recruiting events. It's also driven a massive shift in the workforce landscape because, as we've all seen, there are a lot of people resigning from one career and getting into a new one or starting their own business, looking at all their options. Julia Manchester from The Hill joins me now. So the maximum bonus, it's only available to recruits who enlist for at least 6 years, but there are other qualifications. What are they?
Yeah, absolutely. There are other qualifications, needed to meet this raise, but you're also seeing the Army very much extending other benefits to possible recruits in order to entice them to join the Army. You're seeing enlistments for 2 years, for example. You're seeing more jobs offered throughout different sectors of the Army, such as infantry and fire control. So really, the Army is trying to boost its numbers as they've been having trouble recruiting. I think part of all of their difficulties is obviously the pandemic, Adrienne. You don't have as many officers, being able to hold these in-person recruitment events at high schools, colleges, job fairs, that kind of a thing. However, the good news is that the Army doesn't appear to be losing people. Apparently, a lot of people are saying within the Army's ranks, really throughout the 2 years of the pandemic so far.
But I think a lot of people are probably wondering at home, okay, wait a minute. We've talked about school bus shortages, bus driver shortages. We've talked about teacher shortages, shortages for hospitality staff. We can't really face any more shortages, and especially if this could be a national security issue. But is anybody using that kind of language to describe this?
Well, we don't really see that language yet because we're not seeing people leaving the Army. I think there's just issues getting people to join the Army. So that's somewhat of a bit of a silver lining in all of this. But obviously, they want to get new blood into the ranks. They want to make sure that there's still that lucrative, chain of recruitment going into the Army. So I think that's probably a positive sign here. But it's not only potential national security implications down the line. I don't want to be too dire when talking about this, but it's also economic. I mean, obviously, there's a huge economic driver with the Army as well, and the various bases around the country, for example, and how much those fuel the economy. So it really impacts a number of different parts of American life.
And really, it impacts the generational success of the military, because obviously when you have new recruits in, you're starting this cyclical process that is needed to maintain a strong force. What happens if the Army does not reach its recruiting goals?
I think that's going to be a pretty, unfortunate bridge they will have to cross. I mean, I think the good thing about these recruitment events that I was talking about before is that you get that face-to-face time between, say, an officer and a student or someone who's trying to figure out what to do with their life next, whether that's going to college, going to a trade school, or joining the military. So, for generations, that's really worked in the Army. However, if we're seeing less of that face time, if we see more of these virtual jobs popping up, like you said, the Great Resignation, people wanting to move to a different job, maybe taking a gap year, that could be difficult for the Army because, like I said, they need that new blood in order to sustain themselves.
And it also speaks to the culture that we're in right now. If you don't see those Army recruiting events on your college campus or in your community, you see less and less of soldiers in uniform. It starts to make you less conscious of the military branch in our society. I mean, I think a lot of people are questioning what this could mean societally down the road.
Absolutely. Adrienne, here in Washington, D.C., you see in the greater Washington, D.C. area, I should say, you see many members of the armed services walking around, living in the area, working in the area. It's almost a part of the culture. But outside of this area, in, other parts of America, you might not see that as much. And if you're only seeing the occasional Army ad on television and you're not getting that face-to-face time, you're not really getting that experience of what it means to join the Army, hearing about those stories, those experiences, you start to not think about the Army as much. And, obviously it's very important in the United States to have a strong, armed forces, not only for national security, like I said, but for the economy. So this could have major implications down the road if it's not addressed. The good thing is, though, it seems the Army Army is trying to address this with incentives.
Yeah, head on, but certainly something to think about for future generations. Julia, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.